Hail Satan! Or maybe it's something else. Prince of Darkness, 1987, directed by John Carpenter, is a very interesting take on the apocalypse. Namely, because rather than resort to the supernatural, it resorts to something very credible, scientifically credible: quantum physics. Now, Prince of Darkness is a fascinating film. In terms of the Apocalypse trilogy, it's perhaps my not least favourite, because that would imply that I didn't enjoy it. Because I do. I will watch it every time it comes on television. But in comparison to The Thing and In the Mouth of Madness that will follow in 1995, it kind of falls short for me. But in saying that, the notion of quantum physics used in a film that discusses the existence of God, the devil, and the untold beyond, so to speak, it's a very fascinating and very quite genius way of making a film that deals with good and evil. So what happens in general is that a bunch of students get together in a church and they analyze a very mysterious fluid. Now, they have no conception about where this fluid came from, but it has very interesting properties. And as they find out, it may be way beyond what they were anticipating. Because you see, this fluid is antimatter. It has the capacity to endure through space and time without any particular means to explain it. Now, quantum physics is more or less a study about how matter goes through time, or how time goes through matter. It's a very sort of a cylindrical process, and it is really, really interesting, though there's a lot to wrap your head around. So, through the progression of the movie, this antimatter fluid starts to come off as some sort of gift, if you will, from Satan. But the best thing about the film is that it doesn't definitely say that it's God or the devil that has anything to do with this fluid. It's a popular conception that, yes, it is the Antichrist, but John Carpenter himself has said that he doesn't know what it is exactly. He said it is something evil and it's something that can bring on the end of days for us as humans, but he never pointed it to some religious context. And that to me is fascinating, because most of the film takes place within a church, in a house of God. So it's fascinating that you have something that defies science and reason in a house of faith, in a house of order, something that we can connect ourselves to. But I think another reason why this film is so memorable is because of Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper's role isn't very significant, but he is the head of the bum army, so to speak, the vagrants. The vagrants who live all around the city are starting to become affected by the presence of this antimatter. So what they are going through is the very same thing that the people inside the church are going through. Carpenter has done quite a few siege-based films, like Assault on Precinct 13, Ghosts of Mars. He's managed to cover this sort of subgenre throughout his films, because in terms of what we are scared of, I think it is the fear of each other, the fear of becoming a victim of a mob, of being hunted down like an animal. And how the antimatter, antichrist concentration is able to influence how we think. I like to think that humans are capable of very good things, but at the same time, we're very open to suggestion. If you look throughout history, you have entire nations being brainwashed by a particular idea, a particular faith. It's a very frightening concept, and Prince of Darkness covers this idea that the apocalypse is brought through something that we don't understand, that we are absolutely unable to comprehend. And in saying that, Prince of Darkness also manages to add a realistic base of things. it uses science as a means of opening the door to the supernatural. At the end of the film, it becomes slightly more apparent, and thus perhaps confrontational to Carpenter's own belief that the Antichrist has been sort of reborn into the world and he is ready to spread chaos. So, yeah, it's a very sort of odd film, but I don't think it is bad. It may not be as sensational as, say, The Thing or In the Mouth of Madness in terms of how the end comes upon us, but it is still very, very credible. And the actors in the film benefit from not having like a big name in the cast, except for Donald Pleasence. But in terms of the cast of characters, there's nobody that you really sort of say, oh hey, that's a great big star, I know them by name or something. These people actually look like somebody you know. And I love horror films that do that, because you can live vicariously through these anonymous looking people. I'm sorry, I have no idea about where most of the cast have gone, but they have that everyday look about them. You can relate to them, and in a sense, you can connect yourself with them. And when you're dealing with a horror film that is a lot more cerebral in its approach, it does pay to have characters who have a bearing in reality. They could be your next door neighbour. They could be your teacher, a classmate, a worker, you know. So The Prince of Darkness has a very sort of unique touch, but it's not what I'd call wholly successful. And I think that's just because of the fact that it was incredibly limited by the budget that was imposed on it. At that point, Carpenter was still able to tell stories his way. He still had control over the production and over the actors and everything like that, with very little studio interference. But he still didn't have a lot of money to truly sort of like go beyond what he was displaying on the screen. But I got to give him credit. He is an incredibly economic film director. He will take what he has and he will make anything he can from it. It's a very sort of a Roger Corman approach, but if you ask me, Carpenter is a little more highbrow than Corman. But I digress. So, yeah, when you have, you know, the supernatural meeting with the scientific, it's always a very risky yet very effective approach if you know how to do it right. And John Carpenter makes a very valiant effort. And for better or worse, Prince of Darkness works. The only reason why it's held back is because of its own limitations that it puts on itself. I'm not going to bag any of the actors for their performances because I didn't find anything particularly wrong with them. Donald Pleasence was a delight as always, and Peter Jason, he's another Carpenterian regular. He has a very sort of easygoing approach and a very distinctive voice. A distinctive voice I love, by the way. Dennis Dunn, who was in from Big Trouble in Little China, he has a very sort of a warm, likable presence, and he's able to like make you be there with his character through every minute of, you know, the terror that's going on inside and outside the church. And also, of course, the scoring. Carpenter's films have a very distinct scoring system, mainly because that he has a contribution to it. He's like a sort of a triple threat sort of talent. Like sometimes he'll act, though I can't say I've seen that many performances from him. Of course, he will direct, and he will compose the score to a film. And when it comes to 80s horror scores, like Prince of Darkness it is incredibly underrated, but it is still rather well done. And what's better is that you have a main musical selling point with Alice Cooper. That's not to say he necessarily contributed to the oral arrangement, but it's good to have. Cooper was very, very complimentary towards Carpenter, and anything that Alice Cooper says, I would be inclined to believe, because he comes across as a very sort of genuine fellow who knows his music and who knows what makes music work. So for him to say John Carpenter knew what he was doing, that's reason enough for me. But perhaps the most creepiest part of The Prince of Darkness comes from the famous recording. The best thing about this recording is that every time you see it, a new element is added. when you use a videotape or some sort of antiquated media inside a film, not only is it meta, it also like speaks to the audience. It gives the audience like a heads up before the other characters get it. And to see that shadowy figure standing in the doorway of what could only be described as some sort of church, and in that disembodied voice, this is a message from the future. You're not going to like it. I know, I completely butchered that, but if you watch the film with this recording, you know, in terms of context, it is one of the best visuals of the film. And I don't think I've seen Carpenter replicate something like that in any of these other movies. So, yeah, Prince of Darkness is incredibly stylish. It's got good imagination and it has a heart. And when it comes to making a horror film, that's what you need. You need to have a sense of visionary. You need to have a perception of what an audience will accept, what will keep the audience off balance and yet also intrigued by what you have to show them. So, in comparison to the other two films of the Apocalypse trilogy, it doesn't quite stack up, but you should never dismiss it. It is a gem from the 1980s in terms of the horror, and it's also one of Carpenter's better films, so definitely check it out. So I would give Prince of Darkness about a 3.5 out of 5. I certainly recommend it if you are a fan of John Carpenter, or if you are a fan of intelligent horror film or thriller. Definitely check out Prince of Darkness, you will not be disappointed. Or if you are, you can still say, I saw John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness and Satan has never looked so odd. Well, again, isn't Satan? Who knows? I think only John Carpenter knows. So, yes, Prince of Darkness, check it out. Oh, and by the way, Garrett Collins, I accept your challenge. And I look forward to breaking you. See you later.